Hundreds of people once danced until they dropped dead. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg became the stage for one of history's most bizarre medical mysteries, the dancing plague. Men and women moved in a frantic, uncontrollable frenzy, their bodies pushed beyond all limits, collapsing from exhaustion, stroke, and heart failure. By the end of this story, you will understand the strange mix of science, psychology, and superstition that might explain how such a tragedy could occur. We will investigate whether a toxic fungus poisoned their minds, or if collective despair literally moved their bodies. What does a society pushed to its breaking point look like? Strasbourg, in the summer of 1518, was a city under a different kind of siege. The air was thick and heavy with heat, pressing down on cobblestone streets, where fear was beginning to curdle into full-blown panic. It all began with one person, a woman whose name has been passed down through history, Frau Troffea. She stepped out of her home and into the street and simply began to dance. There was no music, no celebration. Her movements were frantic, desperate, and utterly unstoppable. She danced for days, her body refusing her pleas for rest, a lone figure trapped in a private, exhausting torment. But she was not alone for long. This strange compulsion proved to be wildly contagious. Within a single week, the number of afflicted dancers swelled to nearly 400 people. The city's public squares transformed into horrifying stages of mass suffering. You could hear the gasps for air, see the hollow look of exhaustion in their eyes. Their feet bled, staining the ground. Some dancers suffered broken ribs from the relentless, violent exertion. They danced until their bodies gave out, collapsing from strokes, heart attacks, or sheer fatigue, with dozens paying the ultimate price for a compulsion they could not understand. Faced with this terrifying spectacle, the city's leaders made a decision that seems utterly irrational to us today. Consulting with physicians, they arrived at a diagnosis rooted in the medical beliefs of the era, an imbalance of the humors causing an excess of what they called hot blood. Their prescribed cure was as bizarre as the disease itself. They reasoned that the only way to burn out this sickness was to let the dancers dance it out. So the city authorities constructed a large wooden stage in the horse market, hired professional musicians to play lively tunes, and even brought in strong men to keep the afflicted dancers moving. It was a public health measure that became a death sentence. This well-intentioned but catastrophic intervention did not cure the mania. It amplified it, creating a feedback loop of sound and motion that pushed the dancers harder and faster, ensuring that the death toll would only rise. The stage in Strasbourg was not a unique horror. To understand what truly happened there, we must pull the camera back and see a much wider and much darker picture. This was not an isolated incident. For centuries before 1518, similar outbreaks of uncontrollable dancing swept through towns and villages across Europe, particularly along the Rhine River. Historians often call these events St. Vitus's dance or St. John's dance, names that point directly to the deep religious fears of the time. The people of this era were living in the long, cold shadow of catastrophe. The Black Death had wiped out a staggering portion of the population, and its memory was a fresh, open wound. Recurring famines turned harvests to dust, and extreme poverty was the common condition for most. This was a society balanced on a knife's edge of collective trauma, where despair was a constant companion, and the world felt utterly unpredictable. In this climate of fear, people searched for meaning, for a reason behind the suffering. They often found it in their faith, but faith itself was a double-edged sword. This is where the mysterious figure of St. Vitus enters the story. He was a Christian martyr from the time of the Roman Empire, and his cult became strangely intertwined with the dancing mania. People believed that St. Vitus possessed the power to both cause and cure these bizarre fits. If you angered the saint, Perhaps by failing to observe his feast day with proper reverence, he might curse you with an unstoppable urge to dance. Yet, if you prayed to him for mercy, he might also grant you a cure. This paradox made the dancing plagues a terrifying cycle of divine punishment and desperate hope. Pilgrims would travel to chapels dedicated to Saint Vitus, begging for relief, their journeys a physical manifestation of the spiritual anxiety that gripped entire communities. So when we look at the woman dancing alone in a Strasbourg street, we are not just seeing one person's breakdown. We are witnessing the peak of a pan-European phenomenon, a physical symptom of a society's broken spirit. The dancing was a language of distress, a collective cry from a population drowning in hardship and supernatural dread. But what if the explanation was not only in the mind? What if something more tangible, something you could literally eat, was also pulling the strings? One of the most compelling scientific theories points to a hidden poison in their daily bread. The culprit was a purple-black fungus called ergot, which thrived on damp rye. This was the grain that formed the foundation of the Strasbourg diet, the very stuff that kept them alive. Inside that sinister fungus are powerful compounds known as ergot alkaloids. In a modern laboratory, you would find that these chemicals are the direct chemical cousins of elastine. The effects of ingesting them are terrifying. They can trigger violent, involuntary muscle contractions that look like convulsions. They can plunge a person into vivid, waking nightmares, full of hallucinations and a profound sense of dread. If you were a doctor from 1518 witnessing such symptoms, how would you describe it? You might see a person twitching and jerking, their mind lost to visions, their body moving in a frantic, uncontrolled rhythm. You might very well call it a compulsive dance. The historical evidence for this theory is surprisingly strong. The summer of 1518 was notably wet and cool, creating the perfect damp conditions for ergot to flourish on the rye crops. Furthermore, the symptoms recorded in some accounts do align with a condition well known to the medieval world, ergotism, which was then called St. Anthony's fire. This connection seems to offer a neat, scientific solution to the mystery, a tangible toxin to explain a collective madness. Yet, for all its appeal, the ergot theory begins to fray at the edges under closer scrutiny. The classic, documented symptoms of ergot poisoning are far more gruesome than dancing. Victims typically suffered from an agonizing burning sensation in their limbs, followed by gangrene as the blood vessels constricted, and the affected tissues literally died and turned black. It was a slow, painful decay, not a coordinated, days-long dance marathon. Furthermore, the idea that hundreds of people in one city would have all eaten from the exact same contaminated batch of bread, and that this poison would have produced such a uniform and specific behavioral response in all of them, strains credibility. Toxic reactions can vary wildly from person to person, so if a fungus did not orchestrate this deadly ballet, what other force could command hundreds of bodies to move as one? Perhaps the dancing was a sickness of the soul made visible through the body. When we set aside the idea of a physical poison, we are left with a force just as powerful, the human mind under extreme duress. Many historians and psychologists today point to a condition known as Mass Psychogenic Illness. This is a complex term for a startling phenomenon where physical symptoms with no discoverable medical cause spread rapidly through a group of people. It is a physical manifestation of shared psychological distress. Think of it as a collective trance, where the intense anxiety and beliefs of one person can be subconsciously picked up and mirrored by others, creating a chain reaction of very real, very debilitating symptoms. For the people of Strasbourg, the conditions were perfect for such an outbreak. They were not just hungry, they were malnourished, weakening both body and mind. They lived in constant fear of diseases they could not cure. Their world was saturated with religious fervor and a deep, pervasive belief in saints, curses, and divine punishment. This created a pressure cooker of stress, a community-wide state of hyper-suggestibility. In this fragile mental state, seeing Frau Troffea dance was not just a strange sight, it was a powerful psychological trigger. Her desperate, involuntary movements became a template, a suggestion that their own pent-up fear and despair could escape through the very same physical expression. One by one, their minds literally willed their bodies into the same frenzied dance, a collective cry for help written in motion. We see echoes of this even in the modern world. In 1962, in a region now part of Tanzania, a laughter epidemic began at a boarding school for girls. It started with just 3 students who found they could not stop laughing. This strange, compulsive laughter was not joyful, it was distressing, and it quickly spread. Soon, dozens of students were caught in its grip, with the laughing fits sometimes lasting for days, forcing the school to temporarily close. There was no virus, no toxin in the food, just a powerful shared response to the stressful environment of the school. This modern case shows us how readily the mind can translate overwhelming social and psychological pressures into a physical reality that sweeps through a community. The people of Strasbourg were not faking their torment. Their bleeding feet and broken ribs were tragically real. Their minds, trapped by the overwhelming hardships of their existence, had found a terrifyingly literal way to dance their despair to death. But does this psychological explanation close the case entirely? Or does it leave one final, haunting question unanswered, so we are left with 2 powerful but competing explanations? One points to a toxic fungus in the bread, a biological poison that could warp reality and force the body into convulsive movements. The other points to a sickness of the mind, a shared psychological break born from unbearable stress and collective trauma. The truth is, we may never know which one, or perhaps what terrifying combination of both, finally pushed those people over the edge. The dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries, a perfect storm of biological, psychological, and sociological factors that we cannot neatly separate. It stands as a stark and haunting lesson about the profound and sometimes dangerous connection between our inner world and our physical body. It shows us how the unspoken pain of an entire society can manifest in the most unexpected, literal, and heartbreaking ways. We want to hear what you think. After this journey through the facts and the theories, what do you believe caused the people of Strasbourg to dance themselves to death? Was it a poison, a psychosis, or something else entirely? Share your own theories in the comments below and tell us about any other strange historical mysteries that capture your imagination. For more deep dives into the greatest enigmas of our past, be sure to subscribe.